growing up in the 90s, what was your surrounding like? Did you completely believe in the narrative that it was oppression by the center on Kashmir?
So earlier we didn't understand it. The censorship was at a very high level. So even though you saw things around you, you didn't talk about it at the dinner table. So for example, there was an encounter.
So it was a personally put censorship, right? I mean, there was no...
Yeah, I think the
because
parents
Kashmiri
were
media
afraid of
was-
exposing
okay.
the children to the conflict narrative. And even though it was all around, and that's the, sort of stunning thing about it, that there's an encounter happening. And there was something called a Mandir school. So where the locality where I come from, it's called Sona Masjid. And there is a Raghunath Mandir over there. It's a really large, it's a grand temple. But after the Pandits left, I believe it must have been deserted and, nobody was taking care of it. So the insurgents will often take shelter over there. And there used to be a school run from the premises. So even though there were these very clear, sort of indications or remnants of the past, so to speak, we never really talked about it. It was never discussed, the conflict, everything. At least in my home, it wasn't discussed. So maybe the parents didn't want, us to be exposed to that narrative. And it wasn't until 2010 that my generation became aware of the conflict in a very immediate sense as to what is, happening. Like before that, we knew like there's something going on, but we started talking about only in 2010.
But you saw the militants openly.
Yeah.
You saw all that
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
But when you say that parents didn't talk about it, but it was obvious all around you that militants. So in the 90s, India almost lost Kashmir, right? It was almost like it was talked about whether Kashmir can still be a part of India or not. That was the conversation which was happening around the world. And you were growing up in Kashmir. Did you believe in the Azadi narrative at that time?
Oh, we had no idea. I mean, there was one instance where my deceased Khala, she passed away in 2020. So she had an incident. We were very small at that time. She was walking through the Palladium Lane and there was a bomb blast over there. And her, I think, right arm was nearly severed and it was saved by a very miraculous surgery. But even then, despite all of this, at least in my family, it wasn't discussed. There was some kind of censorship where, it was probably so explosive a topic that we didn't talk about it. Despite, for 4 years she was in recovery. Her arm, it was like it took a lot of time to get back to normal. But we never talked about the conflict. And it's really the, street protests of 2008, 9 and 10 that really sort of gave us an awareness that there is even a conflict. So till then there was no, I mean, I can speak for myself at least. There was no awareness of the conflict.